Guys, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It is free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you all on its own so that it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. I am loving it, guys. I hope you'll enjoy it too.
Are you doing something which you really want? And I think that's really the question to ask yourself when if you're questioning, am I being myself? Really, what you're asking is, am I doing what I genuinely want and what I truly want and feel like doing? It could be at this moment, it could be today, it could be this week, or in this lifetime.
Welcome, guys, to the first episode of Mysteries of Mental Health. My name is Tanaz Ayub, and I'm the host for this show. Each episode, I interview experts who would share some information and tips on how to have a balance between our physical and mental health, which would help you to lead a happy and peaceful life. Today we have with us our first guest for the show. He is Mr. Vinesh Sukumuran. He is a positive psychologist, an organizational consultant and coach for behavioral change, performance enhancement and leadership development. He has coached more than 20,000 people and been a consultant for companies like Titan, Nokia, Microsoft, and many more. He himself is a wonderful podcaster and also the author of the book From Behavior to Well-being. So, without any further delay, let's learn more from him about human behavior and well-being. Hello, Vinesh. Welcome to the show. It's my pleasure to have you here.
Hi, Tanas. Thanks for having me over.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. So, Vinesh, please tell us more about what well being means to you.
If you look at the World Health Organization, the WHO, they in their preamble they talk about health being a state of complete physical, mental, social well-being, and not just the absence of disease. So in my book, I'm
Right.
essentially talking about being well, and I define well-being as a state of being happy, healthy, upbeat, also being fortunate and feeling good, if you like. In other words, living the good life. That's it. So every time in the book, as well as, perhaps in this interview, when I refer to well being, I'm talking about living the good life, and I'm talking about people being able to feel good physically and mentally and emotionally and socially. And I think that's really what well being means.
If we say physical well-being and emotional well-being and being happy, so what are the aspects in which we can be happy? Like people say, if you get so much of wealth, you'll be happy. If you attain a career, you'll be happy. If you get married to so and so person, you'll be happy. But I see people not being yet satisfied after getting all these things too. People are not really leading a happy life. So what is the main thing which a human or which we in this generation is missing? What do you think about it, Vinesh?
See, I think one, popular argument which is out there, which you'll find a lot of research papers about, books written about it, is that our predictions and estimates of the future are pretty, shall we say, inaccurate. So, I think it was Seth Godin who said, you might get married to a person, the person A got married to person B in 2020, and that same person A wants to divorce person B in 2030, Likewise, you get a job or you working really hard to get a job or to reach a certain state after 5 years, after 10 years, 20 years, whatever. And finally, when you reach there, you realize it's not as exciting as you imagined it to be. So this is not a new problem. But I think if you leave the future out and if you leave the past out, if you can just focus on the present, and I know I'm stating the obvious here, if you can just focus on the
Yes.
present, and maybe one of the secrets, at least I've realized in my work as a coach, if you can practice being happy right now, I think that would be not an ingredient just for present happiness. I think that would also be a great ingredient for future happiness.
Right, right. I agree with you, Vinesh. That's a wonderful outcome of my question. You can say, like, being in present, so be in the moment and just enjoy what you have in hand, right?
Yep, I think that second part, Tanas, is the critical part. I think it's about enjoying what you have in hand, or at hand, because if you're in the present, I mean, a lot of books out there do talk about being in the present, but I think a lot of times if you're in the present and not enjoying it, either you're not doing it properly, or you're missing the plot.
Exactly, and agreeable. So, which one we can give more value to? For example, we have the emotional health and we have the physical health. So, how do we balance this, and how does emotional health affect physical wellness or physical health?
See, I mean, it's like this. If you, when you feel sick, or when you fall sick, physically sick, when you have a fever, for example, you do feel emotionally down. And I think all of us have experienced that. Also, a lot of times when you're going through something in life, like for example, if you're going through some real personal problems in life, it's also easier to mentally break down. People cry more easily, or they break down more easily, or have a meltdown more easily when other things, or many other things in their lives, are going wrong. And also the opposite is true. Like for example, when you get stressed, you also, your shoulders stiffen or tighten, your eyebrows become furrowed. You also have some physical indicators of it, though what you're going through is mental or emotional stress. Okay, it's like when you go through something in your mind, there are physical manifestations of it. I think people understand this quite easily. If you're talking about, I'm sure we've all watched movies. Now,
Yes.
we know the movie is just a mental experience. It's happening out there. You're absorbing the movie, mentally. But sometimes when there's an emotional scene, you cry. And the tears are physical, they're real tears. And, that could have cause physical changes in sensations in your body. Now, imagine holding things, emotions like hurt or regret or guilt for extended periods of time. I think when that happens, it does have physical manifestations. Even the opposite positive side of that is true. You might be at work and feel pooped or tired pretty quickly, but if you're on vacation, you could be going out from morning till evening, shopping and going and seeing places and going to a museum, but still have the energy to go out at night, because mentally you're in a different space. So I think there are strong correlations between, or connections between your physical and mental well-being, and one sort of influences the other.
Okay. It's a great explanation. Thank you so much, Vinesh, for the answer.
Hmm.
And say, suppose if a person is really hurt and they are carrying this emotional, whatever they have carried from the surroundings or their experiences, if they are carrying it and if they are facing it for a prolonged period of time, it creates emotional baggage. So then they are somewhere stuck in that moment, in that incident. So how do a person cope up with that so that it stops affecting their current situation?
See, I mean, first of all, I must clarify that, not all disease or not all ailments are necessarily emotional, because I've sort of experienced that in my own life. I've seen that in other people's lives. So, for example, if you're lifting weights and you lift something really heavy and it sprains your back, or you eat something which you just can't digest and you start having a bad stomach. I think these things are very, very physical things, Or if you're working, I met somebody who's been working in a factory which has toxic substances, and eventually he's got a skin disease because of that. So I think these things are pretty physical things. It's something like you looking at the computer screen for a long time, and then you're going to have, blurry eyes, or or a problem with your eyes. So let's keep in mind that there is a purely physical dimension to it. Okay. But on the other hand, like I told you about, anger and stress. Now, when you feel angry and stressed, I remember once I was, before the lockdown, I was at, I think it was the Delhi airport. Yeah, I think it was the Delhi airport. There's this guy who finished I think he probably finished a meeting or a review or whatever, and he's at the airport, and he really lost his cool with the waiter. And I was at this airport, a restaurant in the airport, and he was so angry that his voice was shaking, he was physically shaking, and that anger had to come out. Now imagine if you're carrying this sort of anger inside you for extended periods of time. Definitely it's going to have implications, and it'll show up physically in the form of pain, in the form of discomfort, in the form of some sort of disease. I've heard people who are into mainstream medicine and alternative medicine talk about anger being translated into cancer, into tumors, and so on. So I think, to go back to your question, it's a good idea to identify why you're having a physical ailment. If it's purely physical, then there are physical solutions for it. But if you feel that it's mental, then it's like I remember coaching somebody who she fell sick. And basically, when she fell sick, her life got easier, because the husband was taking care of her, the family was nicer to her. And, this falling sick really helped her. And then she didn't want to recover. And every time she was on the verge of recovering, she realized that she had to recover and take on all these responsibilities back onto her shoulders. And so she continued being sick. And there was a time when we spoke, and I said, you have to let the sickness go because your body's said bye bye to the sickness. I think you have to let it go and then roll back to normal life. So that I think those are the real answers to the mental or emotional side of holding on to a disease. And I think also I remember meeting somebody. This guy was he's from a background and a situation right now where he's not getting enough love and care in his life. So for him, falling sick was a way to get that. And he kept jumping from one, unlike the lady I told you in the first case, this guy kept jumping from one illness to another. So first his leg got fractured. Then, by the way, these are all real things. He actually fractured his leg. So he wasn't making it up. Okay. So we went and did the X-ray and the scan. His bones were broken. But after he recovered, then he developed another health problem. So then, when we were talking, this thing came out. And then one of the things that he said was that, when he was sick, he got tender loving care, he got attention. And I think if he got attention through other ways, he would have let this go, which is what eventually happened.
Right. It's like the positive thing happened here for the lady in the first case, which you said. She started gaining attention, and the second person, he also started getting attention, but at the cost of physically being sick.
Correct. In fact, the lady I mentioned in the first case, her life had become so easy and laid back and relaxed that it was difficult for her to go back. It's like going, how you feel on a Monday morning, getting back to work. A lot of people feel like, oh, it's Monday, I have to go back after the weekend. And now we're just talking about a 2-day weekend. Imagine somebody who's been like that for 6 months and has had an easy, relaxed life that's taken care of. Now suddenly you have to get back and, take control of everything that's around you, which you were anyway responsible for. So because she didn't know how to do that, she was sort of wanting to be. It was easier for her to be ill than to get back to life.
Kind of being in the soft comfort zone, you can say.
Absolutely.
Wonderful explanation, Vinesh. So, can you tell us more about your book, From Behavior to Well-being? What is the most important and helpful message that you would want to convey to people through this book? So, to put it in other words, what is the biggest problem that you wanted to solve through this book?
The name of the book eventually was my core message. So the book is called From Behavior to Well-being. Okay, and the tagline is how your behavior can help you live a good life. Right. So that actually became that's really the tagline. And what that means is that well-being is something that most people are after. So whether you're trying to you asked me earlier in this interview that people are after either getting married or finding the life partner or getting a job or making X amount of money. Now all this leads to some fundamentals of well-being like peace of mind, happiness, and things like that. So in the end, everyone is after well-being and whatever that means to you. Okay, so this is one, say, direction of the message in the book. The other thing is the book is called From Behavior to Well-being. The other thing is about behavior. So, I define human behavior or just behavior in general in the book as anything that you do. A behavior is anything that you do. So from behavior to well-being means you can do things to start living a good life. And in many ways, it's a book of control. It's a book of taking control of things in your life and sort of exercising control and consciously directing your life into a better, happier, sweeter place. I think that's really the message and what the book is all about.
That is really heart-touching, Vinesh. I think I'll go through your book completely once again. So I'm looking forward. Thank you so much for your insights here.
Sure, Tanaz, you should do that.
Sure, definitely. So every individual here on this planet, like, possess some behavior patterns. For example,
Right.
say suppose how do we behave in front of our parents or how a person behaves in a relationship. from one relationship to another relationship. There is some behavior pattern which they are following and which is following them throughout the professional and personal life. So, how can one change this pattern which they have been carrying from childhood?
So, I mean, sometime back, I was in a conversation like this, and I gave a talk on Mental Health Day for another body. And they had asked me this question about what do you think has a greater impact on your behavior? Is it genetics or is it something which you acquire? Is it nature or nurture? And I'm glad that you're focusing on this part of it, because the challenge with genetics is you've already been given your genetics. There's nothing much you can do about it. Okay.
Right. Right.
But with respect to your behavior, or because with respect to what is acquired, you definitely do have more control. So when you're talking about these behavior patterns, I think the first thing is to accept that there are patterns. Okay. And I think in this whole field of behavioral psychology, or patterns do play an important role. It's patterns of behavior which give you more clues, which help you solve problems, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing, after you identify a pattern, is do you really need to change the pattern? One of the things I mention in the book is that I don't think anybody needs to change, and I and the book is really for people who want to change themselves and who've been unable to do it and who need help or who need insights to do it. I think that's really where my book would help somebody. But if somebody doesn't want to change and they think they're perfect, and I think that's perfect too. The second question to ask yourself after you've identified a pattern is, do you need to change that pattern? And I think a good thing to do is to be able to channelize it, because some of these patterns, I believe, they just need expression. Like, for example, a popular pattern I get to talk about and notice in a lot of people is the pattern of identifying what's not going well. Okay.
Yes.
So these people identify what's not going well in the city. They say Bangalore's a city with a lot of traffic. The world is getting worse. They identify all these things. Once again, in their families, they identify mistakes which other people are making. In their own life, they identify what's not going well. And I think this fault finding mindset probably needs expression. Now, I remember meeting somebody. So maybe this, since you're in testing, you're probably on the island and not able to see it from a distance. But I met somebody, she's throughout her life, she says she works well and she functions well when she peak performs when things are not going well in her life during crisis. Now, when I asked her some questions during the coaching session, I realized that this is one of her strengths. Her strength is she performs well when things are not going her way, or when things are sort of going out of control during different sorts of crises. And eventually, she got a job in customer service, and she was in a department where every day there was some crisis, and she really got to express that side of her life. She didn't, when that happened, when she moved from a job which was very organized, structured, and so on, into customer service, she was in a place where every day she had to deal with crisis situations. And that side of her, that behavior pattern got expression. And finally, what happened was she stopped creating personal crisis in her relationships and in her family and in her other areas of her life with her friends and so on. Because from morning till evening, she was dealing with crisis, and that was taken care of. Now, when she met her family and she met her friends, she was more ready to rest and celebrate what's what's just perfect and normal. So yeah, so I hope that gives you an idea of that. But I must say, not everyone needs to change it. The question to ask is, if you have a behavior pattern, ask yourself, and if you've been smart enough or sharp enough to identify it, ask yourself, is this useful and is it helping me? If it is not, then maybe one of the secrets to change, which I've been recommending to a lot of people, is slow change. Very, very slow change as opposed to sudden changes. So even if somebody's trying to lose weight and they've been overeating is the behavior pattern, maybe I found people being more successful with slow, progressive changes than suddenly going on a diet, suddenly going on an exercise program, trying to do something overnight. Because your weight didn't come on overnight.
Right.
Yeah. So
Then
maybe slow change is the secret in us.
is the right rule. So otherwise, they are tend to leave that in between, and then they'll come back to the same situation. So Vinesh, you were mentioning that the lady used to complain about the traffic, or say someone complains about the traffic and what's not good in a day, or maybe people at work are putting more pressure on you and you're not happy about it. So all the time, most of us, what we do is we just complain or we blame. So is it a behavior or an emotion?
It's definitely a behavior. A behavior is anything that you do. It's something that you're doing, noticing not what's not going well or the traffic is something that you're doing. So it's a behavior. What happens later? I mean, it's likely that it has a very typical or a definite emotional response. It's likely that it has something which is very lukewarm and it doesn't even come to the surface. So there are a lot of people who are driving in traffic and they're not particularly affected by it. There are some people who are very strongly affected by it. So how it impacts you will decide what sort of emotions it gives rise to in your system. So that particular thing is definitely a behavior, and it's a behavior pattern.
Wonderfully explained, Vinesh. Does behavior leads to emotions or emotions leads to behavior?
In fact, I've made a podcast about this. You can go back and listen to it. It's called the difference between feelings and emotions, and how positive emotions are your default state. But the interesting thing that happens is your behavior leads to certain emotions, and because of those emotions you behave again, and then that leads to more emotions. So it's a cycle. It's a self perpetuating mechanism which feeds on each other. Okay, so just to give you an example, you might go and meet somebody. Meeting that person will get you into a certain emotional state, and because of that you might do again the next thing, and that gets you into another emotional state. So it's an ongoing cycle.
Okay, okay.
So one does lead to the other, and vice versa. So if you, it's difficult to say what started first, but if you just take a definite time period, like for example, when you wake up in the morning, most of the time you act. So, and therefore, I would say, and not because my book is about behavior, but I would say the behavior happens first, because when you wake up, you get up and you open your eyes, and that's something that you do. And I said a behavior is anything that you do, and therefore the action comes first, and then comes the emotion. But I think thereon the cycle starts and continues.
How about reactions? So you are referring to actions over here, which is in turn behavior, which if I say I can understand it as a reaction to a situation or something. How is reaction and response different from each other?
Sure. So maybe one of the good ways to look at it is that all of these are behaviors. Okay. Now, a behavior is anything that you do. A habit is a repeated behavior which you get comfortable at doing. Okay, and then you end up doing it, most of the time, or with a definite sort of spaced repetition. So if you have a habit of drinking tea in the morning, smoking is a habit, and so on. And if that behavior becomes really compulsive, then it becomes an addiction where you just have to have that cigarette if not something happens to you, or you can't function properly. Then it becomes an addiction. Just like that, reaction is a sort of behavior which unfortunately has a slightly negative connotation. But the implicit negativity in that is that a reaction is slightly or somewhat out of your control. So that's why you must have heard this popular cliche of don't react, respond, or respond and don't react. So the response is a more thought out behavior, while reaction is a more involuntary or out of control sort of behavior. And I think if you have to choose, you will obviously, the fact that you're choosing means you're going to respond. You can't choose to react. Reaction is more spontaneous and out of control than that. If you're going to choose, then you're obviously going to respond. And therefore, a response has its own advantages and privileges. For example, if you can decide, just if you take something as simple as somebody tells you something and you don't like it, one of the things to do is one of the response behaviors which you can practice is to wait, listen, and decide to behave only after some time. Okay, or decide to say what you want to say, or decide to give your response after some time. So that is a behavior for you to adopt, which is to wait and listen to the other person. And in this time, you also calm down a bit. You can also think through what you want to say, and then you might end up being more effective in your response after that.
This sounds like a diamond to me. I'm really going to utilize it and grasp it and use it in my daily life for sure, Vinesh.
Let's try it out.
Yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
So, among all these behavior patterns which we were just now discussing, if someone has adapted the habit or the smoking habit, or say, suppose reacting and responding angrily, which becomes a behavior for him, out of all these, if we want to leave all this and just be ourselves, what is the first step one can do to learn to be ourselves?
There's a question in philosophy, and it's if a child is born and the child does not have any of the senses, so can't see, hear, smell, taste, touch. Okay, and the child is brought up like that. Later, can the child think or not? So now there is one. I mean, there are different lines to this argument. But I'm of the opinion that a lot of times, while we are saying be yourself, a lot of what we consider as ourself is what we've absorbed from the world around us through our sight, hearing, smell, touch, and taste, through experiencing life through our senses. All right. So I think that's a fundamental starting point of you appreciating the idea of being yourself. So whatever pattern you have and whatever is going on in your life and so on, you would have acquired these behaviors through your senses. And when you say be yourself, a lot of time people are referring to not necessarily something original or something which is so novel that nobody's done it before, but they're basically saying that are you doing something which you really want? And I think that's really the question to ask yourself when if you're questioning, am I being myself? Really what you're asking is, am I doing what I genuinely want and what I truly want and feel like doing? Could be at this moment, it could be today, it could be this week, or in this lifetime, or in my career, or in some area of my life. And once you start that questioning process, and if you realize that what you're doing is you're not being yourself, which means at a very micro level, you're not doing what you want to do or saying what you want to say. But at a macro level, you're in a field that's the wrong field for you. You're living in a city which you hate. You're in a relationship that's not the right thing for you. And therefore, you've done many larger, big ticket items which are not in sync with your true self. So maybe a good starting point is to start with the small ticket items. And when I say small ticket items, just start with something. I mean, I've coached some people to do this. I've told them just start with something simple. Eat only what you want to eat. Don't get anybody to impose. Like I met this guy who said, I put on weight because in my family everybody eats. They force me to eat, and so on and so forth. Okay, so I said, you eat what you want to eat. That's a very small, clear step you can take towards being yourself. And when he started doing this, because there were larger implications, he began to start he started looking like a person he didn't want to look like. So when he started doing this, it was a tough step because he had to tell people who cared about him and who he loved that he's not going to eat something because he doesn't want to eat it. So I think if you can start with something as simple as that, and start by doing some things which you really want to do, slowly and steadily you can do larger things, and slowly and steadily you'll start living a life which is true to what you want to live like, and therefore it will become an expression of you being yourself. And maybe I should also say this: there are something things which I maybe you can call them umbrella desires, or umbrella wants or needs. So sometimes you want to do something. For example, you want to play the guitar, just as an example. Okay.
Yes.
And if you say that, my family doesn't allow me, or my partner doesn't allow me, or my work schedule doesn't allow me, but what do I really want to do? I want to play the guitar. And then you join guitar classes. But the class itself is painful to go to because you have to come after a tiring day and do it and go for the class. And now you have to ask yourself, my umbrella desires to be a guitarist. And within this, there will be a number of smaller things which might not be comfortable, but I'm happy doing it because I know I'm going to get closer to my goal one day, right?
Right.
So you might have to do something uncomfortable like going to the class when you're still tired. You might have to, in the class, if you ever learn to play a musical instrument, you have to hold your fingers in some really uncomfortable positions. It's not natural. It is definitely not yourself, but you will do it nevertheless because it's going to make you play the guitar, get you something which is closer to your larger umbrella of wanting to be a guitarist. So I think it's the reason I'm saying this is sometimes I tell people, they tell me they want to be themselves and so on. It is not about doing every single move which you like and which aligns with you, who you really are, which is what you want to do. Sometimes to be a parent, you have to do a bunch of things that you hate, but you enjoy being a good father or mother to a child, and that's okay. So I hope that makes sense to you, Tanas.
Yes, it already did, Vinesh. And as you were talking about the person who wants to, say, suppose lose weight, and but he is all the time he has been asked to eat a lot because of all those love from the family. So here, what challenge I see is a person can face is saying no. To a loved one. Saying no is a really big challenge for we humans. So, how do we deal with that?
Yeah, so it's I was in the US sometime back, I think beginning of last year, and I was talking to somebody there, and they were telling me about old age care centers or old age homes, and interestingly, in the US, if you are in an old age home, you're an old person, you have 3 children, but this old couple have been put in an old age home in their old age. It's not taken as a personal insult. Like I think in many countries, if you're in an old age home, the people who are put there, they see it as a personal failure. Like, what kind of children did we bring up that in our old age they put us in an old age home? But in some countries like the US, that's not the case. You are in an old age home. It's a matter of convenience, and I will come and see you on your birthday, on your anniversary. We'll cut a cake together, but then I'll go back home, and you will be in the old age home, and there's staff to take care of you, and either you'll pay for it or we pay for it. So I feel that at least in India, there is a lot of that which is at play. Where if you say I'm not going to eat what you prepared, it doesn't mean I don't love you. I still love you. I still care about you, and I'm still going to be there for you. But I'm not going to put all these calories into my mouth to show you my love. So as long as I don't think it's really, I don't even think I agree entirely with that fact that it's just about saying no, but it is also just about having those open, clear conversations. And many, many times when I talk to people in coaching sessions, a recurrent theme which comes up is somebody who didn't stand up for themselves or their wives or their husbands or their family, or sometimes they just didn't stand up and say what they're supposed to say. They weren't assertive enough. I think a big part of it is not being able to have those clear, open conversations and discussions. Children not being able to say, look, I know that you care about me, but I'm not going to become a doctor because you couldn't become a doctor. I'm not going to realize your dreams because I hate medicine and I hate biology. So I think right from an early age, if those conversations are encouraged and had, I think it would make for a lot more happiness.
Happiness is what we all are running behind, Vinesh.
Mm-hmm.
Assertiveness is what I learned from this particular question. So
Right.
we need to have that courage that we can put into ourselves into a situation where we can just go and put our thoughts, not at the cost of annoying someone or putting them down, but being straightforward, like what do we want.
Right. That's true. That's true. So it's a little larger than just being an assertive person. It's about having the mental and what should I say, emotional space, if you like, to have open and candid conversations, to disagree with each other. But because I don't want to watch the movie that you want to watch, or if because I don't want to do some things that you want me to do, it doesn't mean I care about you less, or I disrespect you as a human being, or as a relative, or whatever our relationship is. It just means that I want you to respect me, to allow me to do something which I want, and I will extend the same courtesy back.
Exactly. So, Vinesh, I'm going to ask you something different from the topic which we are talking right now. So, how should a person deal with loneliness and emotional challenges which arises when a person is bound to stay away from his or her family to pursue their dreams, their career, or education?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you're asking this, Tanas, because I think a lot of people had to face this predicament when the lockdown happened because of the pandemic, and sometimes even with all this, with life being fine and perfect, people are living, such as yourself, living away from home. So I mean, one of the things which I've noticed, and by the way, I'm just looking at people who've been coping well and effectively, and I'm just I noticed that people tend to use technology a lot nowadays. So whether it's having a call, I mean, the number of Zoom calls or calls on Google Meet or Teams or whatever, which happened within families, between friends who lived in different parts of the world. I think was quite a few during this pandemic time, and I think that therein lies a useful clue of how to overcome any sort of loneliness or staying away from people. I think it's good to use technology and the benefits of technology to connect with people who you're far away from. Okay. So even people in the older generation, particularly, they might not be used to even using a mobile phone, but if they can understand or somebody else can help them have a video call, it sort of bridges the emotional gap of not having seen a person for a while. The other thing is, for the person who's living by themselves or living alone, I think interaction with people, the worst thing to do is if you're staying in an apartment by yourself in a different city, the worst thing to do is to not have friends, not interact with your colleagues, not have a close circle in that different city because of whatever other reasons or challenges that you're facing. So I think it's a great idea to go out and meet friends, do things to make new friends, interact with, get to know people who you work with, get to know people who you live around, and so on. I think that would be a great way to battle feeling alone. Also, increasingly, people have been realizing, and there's a lot of research to back this, it's not just interacting with people who you know, like conversations with the guy at the grocery store, conversations with the security guard in your house or apartment where you live in. There are faces which we see regularly. If you're a person who doesn't acknowledge these faces and get to know these faces, I think you will have a harder time and feel lonelier than somebody who knows the driver, knows the security guard, knows the front office person, knows the canteen person. If you're working in an IT park, there's stuff which turns out it's the same people who would mostly serve you every day at the cafeteria, whatever. When you get to know all these people, it's a form, that thirst or part of your psyche which craves interaction gets satisfied through this. And I think you don't have to necessarily have a particular group of people, but you can just meet and interact with people, which will help you feel more connected. I must also say, I think during the lockdown, I ended up doing a lot of sessions, some for companies, some for individuals, groups of friends, and so on. And I realized the people who were most affected by this situation of having to be by themselves and with such limited interaction, which I don't think would have ever happened to a lot of us, they are the people who wanted to escape their rooms, their houses, and they wanted to go out because to also escape themselves. I think these people were the most affected by it. And maybe one of the exercises which I would recommend to everybody, first you got to be comfortable with who you are, with where you are, with living in your house and coming back to your house or your apartment or even your small room. You have to first be comfortable with that. Your idea of going out on the weekend or going out at night or in the evenings should not be to escape that. Should be, I'm comfortable being here, but hey, let me just go out and see what's happening outside. That's a completely different attitude. And I think some amount of definitely meditation is something that helps. And there are a couple of different types of meditation which I've outlined on my podcast channel. So people can go check them out. There's one called Counting Backwards Meditation. There's one called breathing meditation. These are good ways for you to be comfortable with yourself. And therefore, when you're in that space, you will not feel that lonely, because you can feel lonely even having a lot of friends. You can feel lonely in a party, but it's a mental affair. I think if you can get comfortable being with yourself, I think that's the ultimate cure for loneliness.
What I got from the entire conversation is, first we need to learn to be alone, be happy in your own company.
True, absolutely.
If you are not able to do that, then you cannot, if you are not happy with your own company, if you cannot spend like around 10 minutes, 15 minutes or an hour alone, then definitely you are not going to make the other person out there happy.
That's true. That's absolutely the case. And I think it's also important to allow that to happen. I think many times, I've met some people in sessions which I've done who they don't even get to the point. For example, if they're busy, they're okay. But if they have a Sunday evening and there's nothing to do, they don't even allow themselves the time to just face themselves alone and see what happens. The tendency is to run away from that, the possibility of themselves being in that situation where they have to be alone and try to do something else or plan something else or make themselves busy with something which could be totally unnecessary. But a lot of people, they do this because they don't want to be in that situation where they're home alone or they're in the room alone. And I think when I got some people to do this and say that, this Sunday evening or Saturday afternoon or whenever, purposely, deliberately just stay alone and see what happens, they realize it's not that bad after all. They got to stay alone, read a book, do some things, and it got them a level of comfort of being by themselves. So sometimes, you're running away from nothing. You're just afraid that there's a snake in the room, but when you open the door and put the light on, there's nothing. And that realization could be very reassuring.
Right, exactly, Vinesh.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to ask you, how can one stay motivated when already we are going through all these stuffs which we are facing through COVID, with those emotional challenges and the career losses and everything? How can a person stay self motivated?
See, I think the lockdown has exposed a lot of people to sides of themselves which they probably haven't seen before. And I think at times when things are tough and they're not self motivated, they're going through emotional challenges. I think it's one of the behaviors which I found to be extremely useful, and useful particularly for people to address the exact challenge that you're talking about, is this quality of being able to do things even when you don't feel like. So what happens is, that's like a muscle. So sometimes you wake up in the morning, you don't feel like getting to work. And if you haven't exercised that muscle much, you might call in sick. Then you might also do this with respect to your workout in the evening. You're supposed to go to the gym, but you don't feel like, so you don't go. Once again, you don't exercise that muscle. Maybe you're supposed to meet some friends, like you just said, will I be able to go out and interact because I've been inside and comfortable in my own personal space for so long? Sometimes you might not feel like, but you might have to do it. I think that's a brilliant quality to have. And once again, going back to that way of incorporating or developing this behavior, I think the way to do it is to do it in small steps. So maybe you can start with something simple, like, for example, right in the morning, if you can set an alarm for a time and just wake up at that time, that's a great way to practice doing something even when you don't feel like. And I think many people, like, for example, if I have to wake up, I'm just going to wake up at whatever time. And I'm sort of very well trained over the years, right from when I was a student, to do that. Okay, but there are many times when I decide to sleep for longer. So like this, if you can do small exercises to train yourself to do things even when you don't feel like. For example, if you have an exercise regime, you're supposed to do a 30-minute workout every day or thrice a week. And the evening comes or the morning comes and it's time for you to do it. You don't feel like, but you still do it anyway. I think that's a good mental muscle to exercise. Apart from that, there are some general things which have helped a lot of people stay motivated. One of them is, all these are based on releasing what's called happy hormones. Happy, positive hormones are released when you do these things. One of the things is music. So if you can listen to music, especially the music that you like, at every stage in your life and sometimes at every period, there is some song or some kind of music which you really enjoy, and those songs which you listen to once, twice, thrice, you want to keep listening to it. That's a good thing. When you do this, it releases happy hormones and you feel good. Okay. The other thing which you could do is exercise. So any form of exercise is good. It's something that will make you feel good. And if you've ever exercised, I'm sure you would have noticed this. You might not feel like exercising before you start, but after you finished exercising, you feel like you can exercise again. Because it's released certain feel good hormones, which makes you feel like it puts you in a different state of mind and keeps you motivated. The other thing is, very simple thing to do: go out in the sunlight. Just go out. And I know we've had today and yesterday have been cloudy days, but just going out. And if there are moments when the sun is out, to just go and stand in the sunlight for some time, for a few minutes, it releases some good happy hormones, which will make you feel good. Laughter is another thing. So you can watch some stand-up comedy or watch some episodes of some program or serial, or just watch some cartoons or whatever makes you laugh. When you laugh for 30 minutes, you're not going to feel the same as you felt before you started. It's a fact.
Yes, yes.
Try this out. This is something which has worked for a lot of my clients. Just walking. Walking is a fantastic exercise for you to feel better, but also for you to clarify things in your own head, and also not walking and listening to anything. People are in the habit of listening to an audiobook or some music while you walk, but sometimes just walking and in silence. I mean, you might have the traffic noise and other sounds around you, but
Yes.
you're not listening to anything in particular. When you just walk like that, it gets your brain working in a certain way, and it sort of compartmentalizes things. It brings in a lot of clarity. Sometimes when you go for a walk and come back, you just feel clear about some problem you were struggling with before that, so walking is a good thing, and since it's exercise, it also releases the right hormones which will make you feel good. So I hope those give you an idea of staying motivated, Tanas.
Definitely, Vinesh. I got to learn a lot from the very last question. I got to know that consistency is the key to anything, to any habit. To stay motivated, the first thing we need to do is pick up a habit, pick up something which you like to do or love to do, and pick up something, for example, playing a guitar or music, anything that excites you. That these are some of the things which I learned from the last question, and it was great, Vinesh. These are the great tips which I think everyone should follow, and even I'm going to follow starting from tomorrow.
Sure, Tanas, thanks for that. I think, one of the things which gets greatly overlooked is that in life, we're all trying to feel good, but we don't make a targeted, definite effort to do it. So I think even something as simple as finding out, I mean, I like what you said about, understand what makes you feel good. But if you know what makes you feel good, if it's listening to music or reading or walking, spend just an hour doing that every day. That's it. And that's going to have a huge positive impact on your emotional state, also eventually your mental and physical state.
Definitely, Vinesh. That's all from my side, and it was really great conversation which I had with you, Vinesh, with insights on the well-being, the behavior, the emotional health, the challenges. So thanks a
Definitely,
lot.
Tanas.
Thanks
Thanks
a
for
lot.
that. Thanks a lot for having me over and for navigating this
My
this
pleasure.
interview in the right directions. I enjoyed being here and talking with you.
My pleasure too.
Sure.
Thank you so much for being on the show, Vinesh.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys, for your time and listening to this episode. Hope this gave you some clarity and knowledge. If you guys enjoyed listening to this episode, please follow my podcast and give it a 5-star rating. Do share it with your family and friends, and don't forget to comment on what you think about this episode. To reach out to me, you can follow me on Instagram at tanazayub1 or write to me at tanazayubofficial@gmail.com. See you in the next. Till then, stay happy. Thank you.